think illustrators are kind of on their way out. I'm Alice Tangerini, and I'm the staff illustrator here in the Department of Botany, where I have been an illustrator for 52 years on staff, but I actually came here in 1968 or 69 as what I would call an apprentice illustrator, kind of learning from other illustrators all about the field of botanical illustration, which I didn't have any training in when I started. So this was something I had to learn kind of on my own. Was because a neighbor who knew I loved to draw, and I'd been drawing all my life, probably since I was really young, 4 or 5, and then all through school. And I loved to draw horses and dogs. So I drew like people's pets, and I would draw horses from pictures in magazines, or sometimes we actually went to some horse farms, which you could find not too far away from Kensington, Maryland, where I spent my youth. And at the time, I didn't really envision how I was going to make a career in art. I just knew I loved drawing. So a neighbor advised me to look for a summer job with a botanist who happened to live in the neighborhood in Kensington. He was a Harvard botanist, Lyman Smith, and he agreed to see a portfolio of mine, because he was the botanist at the Museum of Natural History looking for summer illustration. So I go to his house, and I have a portfolio of horse and dog drawings, all done in pen and ink, which is what he wanted. And I show them to him, and he was like, "Well, have you done any plants?" And I didn't really have an answer because I didn't have any plants. So I just pointed to the little blades of grass under the horse's hooves. And he kind of like raised his eyebrows, and then he just said, "Come on down to the museum and I'll give you a try." That was the start. And I kept going back every summer, all through school, until my graduation year, and he said, "We have made a position for a staff botanical illustrator, and we want you to apply." So I applied for the position, and I got it. So I went right from school. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in the office, almost the same one, just downstairs, at a drawing table, just like I have now. So that was the beginning. A lot of things have changed along the way. Going through art school in the late 60s, early 70s was a little bit of a problem for anybody who wanted to just draw realistically nature objects or things they saw. It was not popular. Realism didn't really come in until the later 70s. So it was all abstract expressionism, color field painting, which was a big movement in the DC area and in New York. And the school I went to, Virginia Commonwealth University, wanted to kind of promote themselves as being, very much the latest in fine art. So they wanted to emulate kind of the New York school, which was all this color field and abstract expressionism. And I wasn't into it. So school was a little bit of a struggle. I didn't get the best grades, I must say, because everybody said, "Well, we want you to loosen up and not draw these like detailed little animals and plants that you want to do." So anyway, I kind of went through art school, and the very last year I think realism was just starting, so that was 72. And a few of the realistic artists were being shown in New York. And I was so much into that, but they had to have things super large. So I think my last painting that was memorable was a life-size, it was like a life-size horse, 5 by 7 feet. Now you have to remember, I'm doing a 5 by 7 foot oil painting. Then on the weekends and during the summer I was drawing little botanical drawings in pen and ink from specimens, looking through a microscope. But what was in the same realm is the desire to portray something I could see. That was the whole issue, was I had a knack for being able to look at something and draw what it looked like. And in illustration, that is what people wanted as far as scientific illustration. So I would do the oil painting to satisfy my art projects. And I could, if I could draw realistically, I could paint realistically. But all my paintings started with a drawing. I would draw very carefully what I was going to paint on the canvas, and then very carefully paint it in. So the whole idea of being very painterly and doing layers where you put color over color, I didn't do that. I would fill in the area that I had carefully drawn, which wasn't exactly the way they wanted me to paint, but at least it got me to a finished product. And it was definitely the way I was drawing in the office for part-time work. Actually, art is always kind of finding your way and saying, this is what I want to do. And then you find like people, because what happened in my last year at VCU, I associated with the other artists that were doing realism, and we were all starting to do that. So there was like a little kind of art community of realistic artists, and there'd be another community where they were just doing very abstract work, color, field work, so that you find your niche in your group, and you kind of bond with them because you're all doing like art. And that makes it actually much more easy to, get through any kind of curricula where you're not quite fitting into what maybe your instructor is pursuing, and you're a little different. And then I always learned to choose the instructors that would prefer my kind of work. So that actually helped too. With having an arrangement of instructors that I could choose from, and then I could say, I know that person, I know he does realism, I'm going to choose him as my senior paint advisor. So that's kind of how I did it. You kind of look for places where you can fit in, even if you don't fit in with the whole movement. You find your own little spot. Everybody has a style, and I can tell you that I actually taught myself to draw in the style I have now by looking at other botanical illustrators, their drawings, and I literally copied the line work. I copied it, I took a pen, and I tried to mimic their line work because they were respected artists, and I said, if I can draw like them, it will be accepted in the scientific illustration community. But after a while, you do develop a style, and actually the style I developed, I taught it to other interns, and it's generally what I call, when I draw I fill the page. I don't usually have isolated things by themselves. I kind of fill in, and that's a style that I developed here while working, because the botanist said, I want to show this, 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 and this on one drawing. So you develop a style, and you keep it to what people are asking you to show in a drawing. I mean, that's illustration. In my artistic world, I would say it's learning from other artists. And in the botanical world, I learned all of my botany from the scientists here. I didn't learn from books. I had no courses. I just learned on the job, literally, by the scientists saying, well, draw this part, and draw this, and show this, and dissect this flower, and learning from botanists how to do it. I mean, they were, in a way, they were very patient to show somebody who had no botanical background. But they did like the drawing, and the drawing improved. It improved over the years, and I got to use new techniques. So, again, you're learning as you go along. You never stop learning.
No.
That's the nice thing about this job. People say, don't you get bored? Bored. Every single plant is different. Every single plant requires a new set of criteria that you have to weigh, and now it's weighing it, digital, traditional, combining, what do you show? So a lot of it is choice and knowing what your scientist wants.
So communication.
It is a communication between the artist and the scientist. It always is. For one thing, there's a big difference in how it's viewed as a historical object. You have a physical drawing, you have a single drawing. That drawing becomes the original drawing. It has the marks that your hand puts on it, or whatever, your airbrush, whatever. It's you putting on something on a surface that then has, as a conservation person told me, physical and chemical properties that can be identified. In digital, it's like you say, okay, where is your original drawing? The original drawing is really the electronic file recording the movements of your hand, your stylus. It's that recording is actually what constitutes original. And the output is always a print, some kind of or it can be viewed on a screen, but it is, in a way, that becomes a physical output. But then I always say to other artists that say, I only do digital, I say, so where's your original? Oh, it's the first print. Well, you can make 100 prints. You can make them the same. You can change them. So art has become fluid, and now I combine the two. I combine traditional, I make a drawing halfway, I say it's faster this way, I'll scan it, I'll finish it in the computer, and I just combine them. So for me, it's a matter of expediency. Mm-hmm. What gets the drawing done the quickest or the most efficient way, and shows everything that botanist wants to see. And the other advantage to digital is you put it on there, but you control it on the screen, and it's in, like in Photoshop, it's in layers, or it's in something where you can extract it. So if the botanist says, oh, I don't like the stippling there, I don't like the, I want to show more hairs here, but take them off here. I mean, these are all structures. If you do it digitally, you can take it off. Flash. I say, in the old days, oh, you erased, or worse, started over, but I rarely started over. I would start over if I wasn't happy with it. I would erase if the scientist wasn't happy. I'd say I'll correct that part. But that's the advantage to digital, is that ability to pick and choose and do layers and not be redrawing or erasing. You can erase digitally, but you can take areas of it. You aren't constricted to the physical constraints of erasing on a surface. I choose surfaces that actually for me are easy to erase on. That's why I work on film. Drafting film is easy to erase, and it's very sturdy. It's archival.
Yeah.
How archival are electronic files?
No, they don't go bad, yeah.
Yeah, you have to keep up with the programs. You have to save them in different formats so that they can be readable in the future, but you can just make a print. And there's your print. So you have a print, and that's probably another advantage. You always have a print. But you can make a print from a traditional now, too. That has to do with how people view art.
Yeah.
Because nowadays, it used to be very clear. According to one of the curators of art at the Hunt Institute, that's for botanical documentation in Pittsburgh, and I knew him. He was a collections manager here at the museum, and he had very strict rules on how he viewed botanical art and illustration. Botanical art only has to be identified down to, was it family or genus? Gee, there's all these divisions. But if it's botanical illustration, you have to identify it at least to genus and species. That was it. The distinction was basically a botanical distinction. So that's what I'm saying. When you're dealing with botanical illustration, the distinction is how the scientist says it's a distinction. It's not how the artist says it is. It's how the scientist thinks it is. So even though Jim White came from, he was a curator of art, he came from science. He came from botanicals here. He dealt with the herbarium. He said, this is how I divide it. So it really is a matter of identification. Be scientifically accurate, taxonomically correct, and botanical art just has to be really something you can identify as a plant, a flower, whatever, and you identify that. It can be beautiful. It can be absolutely stunning. And then there's a crossover because you have stunning botanical art, which is in collections, which is taxonomically correct. But its beauty transcends just saying it's an illustration. Whereas an illustration is typically made just for the purpose of the scientist, not necessarily for the artist. I try to make mine happy for me. I want to make mine aesthetically pleasing, because as I told somebody, I said, if you don't make a drawing aesthetically pleasing or interesting, they won't look at it. That loses your audience. So you must think that way. You have to think like a scientist, but draw like an artist. Yes, the Illustration Archives started here in, let's say, 1990, I think, with the first, well, it was the first computer program that we had pre-Windows, something called DBase 3. It's totally like gone out the window. So it was an old format. So before Windows, you had a black screen, and then you filled in. And the reason we were starting to do that was, before that we had books and books, and we had catalogs and catalogs of everything, written, typed. Now we could put it into a format. Yay! Yeah, and save huge amounts of data. So it was back then that one of the curators, actually my I think it was my chairman, said, we might start setting up a database for your artwork so you can keep track of it. That was the point, because I was getting so many drawings sitting around, and it was like, well, okay, yours is in this pile, I have yours here, but where is that? And, I want to find it easily. I know where it is, but then the scientist doesn't know. So he said, I think if you start a database, you can keep track of it. So that's how it started. It was for me to organize myself. Shortly after it was started, somebody came up to me and said, oh, I heard you have a database, somebody in botany. You might put some other drawings on it. There's some beautiful paintings, and they're just in these folders, craft folders, down next to the library in the wooden cases. So I went down there to look, and I pulled out these folders, and inside were beautiful watercolor paintings of cactus. And I said, oh, where are these from? And I had to go to somebody and ask. And they said, oh, I think those are watercolor paintings that were published in the Cactaceae by Britton and Rose. And I said, oh, I can put these on the database. Yes. And we decided in the beginning we could have somebody, get this, take a picture and make a slide, and then the slide could somehow be attached to, we didn't even have a scanner, so I didn't make any slides of my drawings until a little bit later, but I wanted slides of those beautiful watercolors. So that was actually the start of the botanical art collection. It was not just my work. It was anything in this department I could find. Any botanical illustration. And they were hidden in wooden cases, they were in the herbarium, they were in people's offices buried under, I don't know, publications, books. Somebody would say, oh, I have these drawings from the past, do you want them? Yes, I want to put them in the database. So that's how it started. Now it's gotten much more sophisticated. It has high resolution images, which we didn't even have scanners back then. Now it has high resolution scans. It has all this information that tag it to a specimen somewhere in the world. Sometimes they're here. Sometimes I find it's a specimen in another country. And if they have a database, I'll put that in so it gets tagged to that database. So in a way, it's now become very worldwide. It went from being just in my office to it's out there. And it's on a website for the botany department.
And the public, right?
Yep, and the public. Public can go look these up. So I have all kinds of artwork on there. It's everything. I have everything from my earliest drawings to ones that I just finished, 3 weeks ago, and I'm putting up. It's the whole range.
How many drawings do you think, if you were to guess, how many drawings do you think you've created?
Oh, it's well over. I know it's over 1,000 because I said there's something like on the database, which is not complete. I think there are 973 that are attributed to me. And I looked it up. I said, okay. I know it's over that amount because there are lots that are not quite on there yet because they haven't either been scanned or they're not published. So I have some unpublished work that I want to put on.
Can you run us through what it looks like to add an illustration to the archive from start to finish?
From start to finish. It depends. If you're starting with traditional artwork, first you pull it out and you identify it. So that usually comes in my realm now because I'm like finding things that people here don't even know. They just say, well, I go to a botanist and I say, what is this plant? And they go, oh yeah, I think that's in Rubiaceae, or oh no, that might be Leganiaceae. What do you think it was done for. I see some initials on here, LBS. I think that's Lyman Smith, because I worked for him. Yeah, it might have been one of Smith's publications. So that gets me started. And so you kind of do this little research project on your own. I usually know who did the drawings. If it was for Lyman Smith, it's Jack Downs, because he drew for Lyman in the 60s, actually in the 50s. And then I basically took over for him in the 70s. So anyway, I know already, I have a lot of that institutional memory, which is good, still working. And I can look at something and say, I know that style. That's Florence Lambeth, that's Nikki Threlkeld, that's that style. Some of them are way before me, and I have to do some research. So it's a research project to get the information just about the drawing. Once you've gathered that, you can now put it on a database. So you give it a file number, you give it a plate link number, and then that gets attached to all the information that I'm going to put in, which is fields and fields. They're right now in Microsoft Access, and then we move it to a Smithsonian-wide database called EMU, because it was developed in Australia. And anyway, and then you have to have the drawing scanned. So you scan it. If it's doable, you scan it on your high-res scanner. I have a flatbed scanner. And you sometimes have the help of interns and volunteers, very willing to do this, because it's sort of an endless project, because we have 6,400 drawings, and not all of them are scanned yet. So, because some were very early on before the scanner, and we're getting to those. And some were scanned at very low resolution, and we're having to redo the low res ones. So it's that project, and then once it's scanned, then you have to label it. You have to mount the drawing on archival boards and attach it to the board, then you print the label with the information, put it in a folder with all the, I would say, related materials. It could be a drawing, it could be a sketch, it could be the notes from the author. And I put them in this folder because I figure it's part of history. And nowadays, if it's related to a plant in the herbarium, I sometimes just print the image of the plant in the herbarium, which is digitized, and put it in with the drawing. And then it goes into a folder with a label, with the family, genus, species, and I file it in the art collection, finally. And it gets cataloged by family, genus, species, alphabetically, because at least that everybody can follow. And it kind of goes along with the herbarium in that sense. So if I'm not here, which in the future I wouldn't be here, but a botanist could find it. A botanist could go in and find that drawing based on the cataloging that I've done. And it'll be divided into angiosperms, the flowering plants, then non-seed plants, which is ferns, lichen, algae, liverworts, all kinds of anything that's non-seed. They'll have their own category, their own special place. And then there'll be Cactaceae has its own. Cactaceae was a big group, mostly because of the early paintings that were done, so they get their own place. And then there's floras, where somebody drew many different genera on one plate, or species, and you can't file it alphabetically, so you put it in the flora. So in a way, that's a whole other project. That's my other job.
So you're the primary steward of that collection. Has it always been that way?
Yes, I have. Actually, it just laid it on my desk. It's one of those other duties as assigned, because in my job description, from the very first day, draws plants given to her by the botanist for publication. And then it was really not much else. And other duties as assigned. So this whole management of the collection is still under other duties as assigned, and just fits in there because somebody dumped it on my desk and said, "Here, Alice, this is what you should be doing. You're a manager, you know the art collection, and that makes sense. Other people handle the botany, so I'm glad that I'm just doing what I'm doing. And I'm just doing drawings. I'm trying to limit it to not getting into photographs, unless they accompany specific plant specimens. I'll put them in with the plant specimens. Photography is another realm. That's into hundreds of thousands of images because people just started printing and now it's digital. And I said, no, let's limit this to original drawings, related material, and keep it that way. And sometimes an original drawing might be a print if it's a lithograph, and we have one. If it's ripped out of a book, I try to tell them it should be in another library called the Rare Books Library. It should have been in a book. So I'm trying to basically do my own sorting of what I say as an original. That's left up to me.
On average, how large are these illustrations once they're mounted and put in the archive?
They are basically all sized to fit in what we used to call the oversized herbarium cabinet. So I had special cabinets made for art because even though they were all drawn at the size of a herbarium specimen, when you mounted them, they gained another couple of inches. So all of my cabinets are sized with shelving that is, let's see, it's 21 inches deep by 14 and a half wide, and it fits 90% of the drawings. The other drawings, which were done large because somebody wanted a big painting, they wanted a drawing life size of something that was 3 feet, they go into the map cases. So I have large map cases specifically made to hold the largest. And then there are some that are always going to be really almost maxi size, and those usually are in frames. And we try to keep them in the frames if they're really, really large, but just keep them in archival conditions, in archival mats, under plexi that's got a light block, you have 3 blocking. So you really try to think in terms of it's art and it's conservation. That's what a manager of a collection has to do. It has to be kept archivally for many years. See, a conservationist would have like very strict opinions about this. Conservation people, paper conservation people are very strict about conditions. We try to keep the conditions here to, I think it's 45 to 55% humidity and kind of 65 degrees to maybe 70 max or less because of bugs. Bugs are the big enemy of paper, it seems. I mean, even in storage. So the paper has to be either what we call lignin-free, acid-free paper, because acid dissolves after a while. And so you want acid-free papers, or what we call museum quality rag, which is not made from a cellulose product. It has to be a cotton, which basically the cotton paper lasts centuries and centuries. And now I've been using polyesters, which are considered archival. Some of them have been polypropylenes, which I said as long as they're kept in dark conditions, they can be kept. And things that are just plain lignin, acid, we try to stay away from those materials because they're eventually going to get brown, and they start cracking, and they can eventually just kind of, like old paper, you touch it and it starts to disintegrate, and we want to try to keep that from happening. So that's one of the issues, and that's why I use archival boards, archival covers, archival storage. There were other contract illustrators in the botany department. There's only been one staff. It's been me, the staff illustrator, as far as this botany department. And then in the other departments, they would have, I'd say, varying numbers. Insects, entomology would have 4 staff, and then they'd have sometimes another 4 just contractors. In mosquitoes alone, I think they had at least two permanent staff. And then they would have rotating contractors in mosquitoes. And then here we would have, I think we had 4 staff. And then there'd be contractors. It depends. Insects was hard to tell because they'd be staff really working for USDA, but they'd be here. So it was kind of hard to say, were they USDA or were they Smithsonian? And then, because there were many more because of the size of the insect kingdom. Then you go to anthropology, and there'd be 2, I believe, for a while, and then there'd be a couple in archaeology. There'd be anthro, there'd be archaeology, then there'd be paleo, and then there would be birds. That was always basically contract. And the same with mammals, but they had long-term contractors, so they would just be there. We would have at least a dozen around in the museum at any one time.
Is that still the case?
No, right now I think there's myself in botany, there's a staff illustrator who's USDA in entomology, and one more staff illustrator who's Smithsonian in entomology. That's it. And the one who's in entomology, she's listed as a research assistant. So she does more than just, she does illustration mostly, but she's under research assistant, I believe. So I think illustrators are kind of on their way out. What's happening is the world is going to identification through molecular means rather than taxonomy means. In the past, it was always taxonomy, structure. It was looking and seeing and saying, this is different from this, from this, from this, and looking at it microscopically. Then DNA sequencing came in, and the whole genomic world came in, and all of a sudden, I don't need to draw for any of the new botanists because they're just doing sequencing to identify their plants and then giving them a name. And in publication, a drawing is not required anymore. It used to be in the old days, a drawing was a requirement, especially for some of the journals. It had to be accompanied by a picture, any new species, and floras even, of these illustrations. Now it's just digital images and molecular DNA sequencing that shows how different it is. And all that is software driven, or it's digital.
What is the importance of botanical and scientific illustration? It seems seems relevant in a way that it's a melting pot of art and science.
Art and science. It's always, I think it's always going to be there. I think there'll be sweeps of happening. I don't see it as the end. I just see this as a very long, where it's going up into genomics. So scientific illustration is just going into another realm. It's going into areas where it depicts, I'd say, problems with society associated with plants. You have conservation, you've got climate change, you've got all of this environmental stuff, and that disappearing environments. So you've got that as the driving force for illustration. It's just in this particular, like in a museum where you have, static objects, herbarium specimens, you can sequence, you can take the structure, you can get the DNA, and you can make deductions from it that are sweeping. I mean, they're changing families. I started working here, there were 280 families. Now there are 430 accepted families. And this is all due to what's been happening in the world of DNA. Yep, and it's not going to, I don't think it's going to go backwards. It's just that scientific illustration is going to take a different turn for a while. And I think the importance of my saving everything is because I want to have things saved now. Because I don't picture somebody being hired to do what I'm doing right now if I leave. I don't see it. I want to kind of get things in order.
So you're pushing to complete or at least resolve undocumented and archived collections.
Yes, I'm trying to do all of the collections that I'm finding here that are not documented and getting them, getting all the illustrations in a database with information and imaged so that it can be available on the web so people can see, that's in the collection. They don't have to come down here to see it. They can see it. But at the same time, I want to save the past. So I want to keep this collection. Even if I'm the last person doing anything that would be saving it in a very physical way, because right now it can be saved digitally.
It's needed, like you're saying, with future and present botanical illustrators working in the field or working in the realms of conservation or bioregional preservation. It's so important.
It's important. They can go back and look at drawings. They're 200 years old. In fact, it was just I think it was 5 or 6 years ago now, that an intern who was working in cactus came to me, and she was told, if you find a drawing in the herbarium, just bring it to Alice. So she found a drawing, and it turned out to be a drawing from an early exploring expedition from 1853. And then it led to the discovery of another 24 illustrations, because I looked it up. The librarian helped me. I got help from the botanist. It became a story. It was like, how did you find out? It was simply a drawing with a very cryptic message on it. And the librarian said, well, let's look up all these initials and see if it's related to a book. And it was related to a railroad survey of a route from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean in 1853. And the drawing that intern found was the first plate. That edition. It was plate number 1. And it was a new cactus at the time, and it was named for it was an Army expedition, so it was named for one of the Army officers named Whipple. So it was Echinocactus whipplei. And so that's how it was. And then we just kept finding, what's plate 2? Let's go look up that one. Sure enough, the drawing was there. The drawings from 1853 were all there. They had been published as lithographs. So somebody had copied the drawings, and they'd been printed on stone originally back then, and now they're just printed in, whatever way they used. So I said, now they're printed whatever way they're going to use, it's online. So, but they were printed on stone, and then they made lithographs. And then for some reason, the original drawings just got filed in the herbarium because they were like, well, what do we do with these? They didn't have a collection. They were like, well, they're related to a plant. Put them in the herbarium. So, good thing they filed them.
And good thing they were found.
And they were found. So, it's important to not just think herbaria are static. They're constantly changing. I like botanical gardens. I still like just looking at nature. I like going and seeing the live plant, even if it's a local plant, even if it's okay horticultural, instead of, native to the region. I just enjoy looking at plants. I enjoy looking at other art, mostly art that is representational, probably more than I still gravitate towards that which has some kind of representation. It can be expressionistic, but I still like to see imagery. I'm just an image-driven person. I like to see imagery in a piece of art. It's just satisfying. I can admire things that are just for color only, and that fills a niche for some people. Art, just seeing art, plants, going out, seeing different environments. I know what plants I use. Well, I'm just thinking when I'm drawing, what plants inspire me. I think it's what I see, and I see color. So a lot of times I am drawing things that just, color. Because I don't see it here in the herbarium. So when I see color outside, I go, color, I can do color. So I like all those colorful things. I like peonies, the roses. I know, and people say, oh, they're so common. But they're beautiful, and they're beautiful to draw. So I say, everything Asteraceae, they have color. Anything that drives me with color. But then in the fall, it can be leaves of a tree that turns color. It's just, or just a structure, interesting looking structures. I've always liked to draw trees just because, they have the branches, the leaves. Their flowers aren't great, usually. But the trees, unless they're dogwoods have really nice flowers. But a lot of the herbaceous things I like to. No, I'll probably go back to painting.
Yeah.
I said, there were some unfinished things I left at BCU. I just left them because they were unfinished, and I said there's no reason to take them with me. But I said, I could go back to painting. It would still be realism. That's I just want to see the image.
Through and through.
Yeah, I want to see the image. I want to see what it is. And I'll probably do things that have memories, or maybe I'll just do flowers in a different way, combining them with other imagery. It may not just be realism, maybe surrealism, and maybe, a little bit taking it apart, but still utilizing how I see things. That's how I would see myself working after a year.
Do you think you'd work with oil or acrylic, watercolor?
Probably oil, because it blends so well, and that's one of the nice things about the digital. I draw digital color the same way I did an oil painting. I draw an outline, and everybody says, "Why are you doing it?" I said, "I have to see the outline of something. I have to see the outward structure. Then I have to draw kind of the inner structure, and then I can fill it in with color, and that's kind of, I'm sure that's the way I'll do it forever. I do it digitally, and I do it in painting. I'm not what you call painterly painter. In fact, that was the big criticism. You aren't painting. Painting is using your strokes of the brush to make the shapes. And I say, no. You draw your shape, and then you add your color. That's right. That's how I paint.
So with the horse painting, you didn't just do a wash for the background. You drew
I
the
drew
horse
on there.
on the beach.
I drew the horse on there. I painted around the horse to do the background. I did not do layers.
Mm-hmm.
I did a layer around the horse, which was the background, and it was on a beach. So I did that outside. The ocean was outside the horse. So everything was still drawn to the image portrayed. I did not work in the way people would say is like a painter. I was still always a technical draftsman with color. That's it. It's a style.
And a choice. I mean,
Yeah, it's a choice.
Yeah.
I choose to paint that way.
Artistic approach.
It's my approach. I think one of the things that I ask people is they're always like, you want to keep your art to yourself. And I say, yes. What's going to happen to it when you aren't around? And most artists are not thinking that way. And I actually want to say, I'm happy that most of my career is cataloged in here. It's here. It may not be what you call great art, but it's a semblance of what I did well. And it's here, it's cataloged, it's viewable, it shows progress. I did advance. So in a way, you have to ask yourself, well, what is going to happen to your art? I guess if you show it, it gets pictured, you get digital images of it, and who keeps those digital images? Because everything here is about how is it kept? Where did it come from? Provenance, and where is it going? Where is it going to be kept? I recently was contacted by a neighbor who said, somebody saw your name in an Etsy product online. Do you sell things through Etsy? And I was like, no. And they said, well, it was your name on a drawing, but it's a drawing you did, it looks like a long time ago, for somebody. It was a Grandma Jahowski, and I said, oh yeah, I used to make little cards for her. She was kind of like my substitute grandmother, because my grandmother one of them died way long ago, and the other one had died when I was just in my teens. So I made these cards for this grandmother. And they said, they're selling on Etsy, these cards. I said, my gosh, they're from the 60s. Yes, from the 60s. How did they get there? When the grandmother died, her stuff was taken over by probably grandchildren who didn't know who I was. And they just said, oh, well, these are kind of cute cards. Let's just put them up on Etsy and sell them. Didn't even know who I was. And the fact is that somebody knew my name well enough to contact a friend, who then contacted me and asked me, are you selling these on Etsy? And I said, no, from the 60s. This is how artwork comes around and goes around. It's kind of strange how it ended up. But see, they just end up in very odd places, and now online you can see them. If somebody says, oh, I think I'll put this up online to try to sell it, or to see if anybody will buy it. Apparently some did sell. I said, well, I did a lot more than what I'm seeing here, so obviously, because I did hear that some of them sold. I asked the person who put them up on Etsy, and she said, oh yeah, some of these already sold. So the nice thing was I mentioned it to a neighbor, and I said, I never buy things on Etsy. And he said, oh, well, He buys everything online. So he went and bought all of them, and he gave them to me as a surprise. And I said, that was very sweet. I said, who knew I'd ever see these again? Drawings from the little tiny paintings. They were small. It was when I was doing little fine work, and I had great eyesight. So I gave them back to him. But that was I think about what it went through to end up back in the artist's hands. So think about that when you say, oh, I want to keep my art. Well, what happens? And you start thinking about that as you get older. Or you think it's digital, so it's out there. Maybe it's on one of those, maybe Facebook, whatever website you put it on, and it kind of just surfaces, but is it going to stay out there forever? I don't know what happens to things digitally, because I haven't been around long enough to really predict. All I know is when I entered the world of the first electronic media, none of the CDs I first scanned can be read. The flash drives got corrupted. Some of them were on these weird large discs that people say, how do you read those things? They were, I think, 8-inch floppies. So between that, the CDs, computers dying with the artwork on, it's kind of a strange world to think, well, that doesn't happen. Oh, yeah. It does. Well, it's happened already to me, so I said, maybe electronically they're saved in a cloud. Who monitors the cloud? Somebody owns that, don't they?
I don't even know. I feel like probably Apple owns it.
Yeah. Okay. So it's always like, well, and maybe it'll be passed on, and okay, it'll be there.
So is it an act of almost like humility? You just kind of have to surrender at a certain point and accept, okay,
Yeah.
well, this is
I've
what
done
goes
what I can
around
do.
comes around,
I've
and
done.
the more the merrier. Why
Yeah.
would I hoard my
Yeah.
art?
Yeah. That's what I said. I might as well,
Or be
pass it on.
upset.
Yeah. I just say, it's I've saved what I can, and it's more for the history of it. I mean, it's not all great art. It's scientific illustration. Some of it's done by friends of the Botanists who are just starting out. So it's a realm. It's a realm of showing early publications and how drawings were done then, and then advancing to what they are now. It's kind of just, okay, for me it's a history. And, oh, look at this drawing from a long time ago, and look at what they're doing now, and oh yeah, you can do that digitally now. It's like, be faster. So, it's an archive. That's what everything is. It's an archive. So,
Beautiful.
I just let it go. When I'm ready, I just say it's done.
Yes.
So,
And it will be there. It will be
It'll be there.
accessible.
yeah, it'll be accessible.
And people's interest is
Mhm.
there. The interest remains.
Yeah. Yes, like I say, it's a history saved. A little bit of history.
And how many plants are in the herbarium and in the archives that, as time progresses, potentially could be more and more threatened? So it's
Oh,
like
gosh.
herbariums are so crucial.
Yeah, they are. They're very crucial. Boy, that's a question for a botanical conservation person. But I know I've already drawn extinct plants. Like somebody said, well, we only found the one, so you get to draw it. Or they haven't found them since. So sometimes when I draw a species, it could be the last one. We don't know. You have to go out there and look for it again, or see if the area survived. And that's why herbaria are so important. It's history, and people that erase history are doomed to forget it. So all I can do is put it out there and then say I've done what I could.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for all the work you're doing and continue to do.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. And you are one of the people helping me get that work done. So I am very grateful for all the help I can get.
Oh, grateful to be here and help in any way. So, thank you for your time, Alice.
Okay. Good. I'm just glad that I can have help dealing with this collection. And that's why I'm so driven to have people help me and try to get everything cataloged and finished to the point where I say, I've done what I could. So thank you.